they're almost in denial that this cliff is coming towards them, and they're either going to get run over, frozen in their boots.
AI is not a set it and forget it. AI
Mhm.
is a create, manage, and iterate,
Exactly.
especially because it's constantly changing.
I want to dissect scale because it's your specialty.
Mhm.
And I think that it is almost a toxic buzzword that's often like too overhyped.
I think people throw the word freedom around a lot, but for me, it's freedom of choice. It's being able to choose, like, what is it that you want to do?
Welcome to Agency Bytes. I'm your host, Steve Guberman from Agency Outsight, where I help agency owners build the business of their dreams. This week, I'm joined by Juliana Marulanda, founder of ScaleTime. With over 1,000 digital agencies served, Juliana helps founders turn their businesses into lean, profitable machines, often freeing up to 30 hours a week so they can run their business without them. She's been featured in Forbes and Entrepreneur. She's passionate about giving agency owners practical tools they can immediately use to scale smarter. Juliana, it's great to have you here. Thanks for being with me.
I'm so excited to be here.
I feel like I undersold you in that intro because I've watched you from the periphery for a number of years now. I think even before I launched this business, maybe. And I've just admired the impact you've had on agency owners. And so I don't think I did justice in what I said. You've built a community, you've built software and platforms and tools and like the impact. And so I really want to dig into like what you've really been doing, but also like it's shifted. So kind of give your background of what led up to you starting ScaleTime and what you've been doing with it.
Yeah, for sure. So I will say it was a long and happy accident. Um, so I started off, off of college, like 20 somewhat years ago, looking at spreadsheets on Wall Street for 16 hours a day. And didn't love it. Was it like my favorite thing, But that's what you did back then, right? Like when you were a New Yorker, and you were smart. Like you went to Wall Street or, like you got the finance job and you did the thing. Um and so I ended that pretty quickly, about like after a year. And then I went into sports and entertainment venues because I've always been super high energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I don't know, like back in the day, if you can imagine like a traveling salesperson, I was like a traveling ops person. And so they would drop me off in a new city about every 4 to 6 weeks. And it was a new event, right? So think Super Bowl, USTA, Ryder Cup, right? And the gig was go and interview about 100 people a day, like speed interviewing, and get your team of 50 to 70 in about 3 days off of these hiring fairs, train them across these massive stadiums and venues that were like, a mile long or, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
1.7 kilometers. My metric system's still bad. So, right, like your resources are completely dispersed, right? Train them for 2 days and then go operate $1 million a week, more or less. Rinse, wash, repeat. And I didn't like managing because I did not know how to manage. I did not know what I was doing, right? It was
Mm-hmm.
like at the beginning, let's say at the beginning. Now I love to manage and I love to develop people and I love to see them grow and, get promoted and all that jazz. But back then I was like, what I did know was, I knew systems, I knew processes, and I knew numbers, right? So I was like, okay, we can hit our goals with these things. Even though, I was not a great manager per se, at the beginning, but I learned, right? And these were sort of the training wheels for really doing it at scale, because we had to go and dismantle, after a week, after 2 weeks, and then rinse, wash, repeat.
At
So
the
I
next
did that
location, you mean?
at the next location.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it
Okay.
was just go, go, go. Most times, you give yourself couple of years to ramp up like that, but this
Yeah.
was just insane. So we scaled at scale, if it were. And when I started the business, like what I had noticed is that people do not like to manage, right? They're like, I started this business and either like I'm a fantastic rainmaker or I'm a fantastic, sort of technician, like tinker, person that likes to like do the R&D bit, but like HR, people, emotions, development, ew. Like I don't want to do this. And so, I really developed, I wanted to develop something, um a service where people could really scale, their agencies. And I wanted to work with agencies at the beginning because they were really on the vanguard of what um traditional org charts looked like, right? We were
Mhm.
talking about strategic partnerships, full-time, part-time, freelancers, contractors, nearshoring, offshoring, like all the
Mhm.
things. And yet we had to use tools, digital tools, in order, right, like project management, CRM, all of these tools to make work happen. And for me, I was like, okay, well, how do we get people to basically deliver on time every time? And how do we create teams that can scale? Especially where they're geographically independent, they're organizationally flexible. And so that was my big challenge. And that's why I started Scale Time. And we've been working with over 1,000 agencies. And I love it. Like, this is what I geek out on.
Yeah, it sounds, I mean, you can hear the passion in your voice about, all right, let's stop managing, let's build systems. Like nobody wants to deal with people other than the people want to deal with people. So, yeah. Uh talk about some of the things that you've seen trend-wise in the last year in dealing with so many agencies, whether it's revenue plateau or, the nearshoring, offshoring, AI integration. What are some of the trends that you've seen that are like really shifting the industry forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest trends is, I would say from a macro standpoint, there is sort of um a, a hesitancy with the economy, right? It's kind of like what is going to happen? We don't know. And I would say 2024 was a weird year economically for a lot of agencies, where what I had seen in 2024 was a lot of downsizing. So a lot of
Mhm.
scaling down in 2024. And I think that was sort of like riff off the pandemic, things had gotten sort of stable. Labor had gotten relatively stable, right? Because if we remember a couple years ago, labor was really crazy. Like,
Mhm.
onboarding packages and hiring packages were like people wanted, like they were trying to compete with like Tesla going into Austin and all this stuff. And
Yep.
and it's crazy. It was like people wanted like 2 weeks vacation paid in Tahiti and shit like that. And it was just like, no, we can't afford that. So I think 2024 was sort of a reckoning for a lot of owners who were like, I need to get paid. Like I'm kind of tired of getting, of the agencies doing the best that they could to survive the ones that
Mhm.
survived. And now it was sort of like the owners taking ownership of like what they wanted and their take home and their peace of mind. So that was an interesting year for a lot of agencies. I think last year, like the dust settled, but then with, depending on if you were like election dependent or not, things, whether the economy, the consumer habits. I think there was a lot of hesitancy. Um, we saw sales cycles um, start to get more leveled, I would say, from 2024. 24 sales cycles were very long. I think they somewhat got leveled, but then AI came in, right? So I I think one of the biggest trends that we've seen sort of disrupting what things look like, is how do you embed AI into your processes and into your communication, right? So I don't necessarily think AI was replacing any specific roles, but what it did do was make roles more efficient and more effective for those companies that are, sort of absorbing AI into their organizations. And so, like, now one person that was doing one specific job can now maybe do two, right? Or maybe three. So we do start seeing sort of a consolidation of the roles, and then how we speak about AI or how agencies are speaking about AI, because um they're dealing with clients being like, well, I don't want our stuff to sound like AI, but are you
Right.
using AI? But we're afraid of AI. But are
Yeah.
you gonna lower our cost because you're using AI? Right. So it's like, right. So I think there's also sort of this communication challenge of how do we speak to our use or powered by AI, keep our prices, and at the same time, sort of like how do we manage our workforce to create the automations, and how do we make it so that our stuff isn't basically a regurgitation of everything else that's out there, and stay competitive. So I think a big trend is we're seeing agencies that are super AI focused doing really well, and agencies who are super creative, outside of the AI bubble doing really well, and everyone else in between is kind of dealing with, how do we integrate without losing our footing and staying competitive?
Yeah, I see the same. I've identified it as there's these 4 levels of kind of AI adoption. There's those that are absolutely afraid of it. They're almost in denial that this cliff is coming towards them, and they're either gonna get run over, frozen in their boots, or they're gonna bail out and maybe do a fire sale or shut it down or go get a job or whatever. Then there's those that are curious and maybe they're playing around with like using prompts or using GPT instead of Google for simple answers. Third level is they're leaning into it for automation, and this is what like I think really helps with scalability and resourceability and being able to roadmap better. So building out automations, building out even generative AI tools, leaning into it, but not production ready stuff. And then the fourth level is they're finding challenges that their clients have and they're building AI enabled solutions for them. So they're selling AI into their clients. And again, whether that's generative AI, agentic AI, like whatever tools they're using and building upon, they're the far most advanced. And so I hope more are pushing towards the third and fourth level, but I'm seeing it all over the place. And I do think that third level is really where the scalability comes from. So if we can build automation tools, onboarding tools, better usability and resourcing tools, things like that, using I think that will help with scalability, which is what you're all about. So
Yes,
yeah.
100%. And I often caution people, though, it's um AI is not a set it and forget it. AI
Hmm.
is a create, manage, and iterate.
Exactly.
Especially because it's constantly changing.
Yeah, there's new what are they calling them? Not new tools, but new versions of the tools. I forget there's a specific word they use for the versioning of the tools. Whatever. So every week it's coming out. So you have to learn like, all right, we were using Sona last week or whatever it's called, and now we're using this version or that version. And so constantly there's got to be a culture of not just iteration, but exploration and curiosity and learning and testing and to your point earlier, like, can you take one person and now expand them into two or three roles? Like, yes, but also there still needs to be that senior level of accountability and there still needs to be that senior level of review because most things are just not production ready, whether it's software or creative generative AI or copywriting or whatever. Like, there's got to be that really scrutinous review.
Mm. Yeah, and I often talk about it as like bookmarking. I mean, not
Mm,
bookmarking, bookending your AI, right? So
yeah,
you need something that is strategic, in the beginning of, whether you're building a workflow automation or whether you're building, sort of content at scale, right? Like we need a human in the beginning to, to sort of bookend the strategy and the direction that you want your AI to go into. And then you need a human at the end, right?
yeah.
And to be able to do the quality assurance and the management of it, before it hits either clients or the market or whatnot. So I'm really big on sort of bookending the AI, even if you built workflows, because it's important to make sure that um you have consistency of end product, and your brand is being represented the way that you want it to be.
Yeah, I love that. I want to dissect scale because it's your specialty.
Mhm.
And I think that it is almost a toxic buzzword that's often like too overhyped and I think that scale is something that can be very healthy. But you talk a lot about like what needs to happen in order to scale, and what does scale look like. And so, from your standpoint, like how do you define scale?
So we've created a framework around scale. And I'll quickly, kind of share it
Yeah.
with you and then we can go into it, right? So the S in scale is to see what is happening. Because oftentimes we're running blind, or our team is running blind, or we have blind spots, right? So we got to really see what is happening. Then we've got to create a baseline. So whether it's our own baseline or it's an industry benchmark or whatnot, right? Like we've got to put together point of references so that we not only know where our goals are, but also like what is our starting point, and so we can figure out those gaps, right? Then it's amplifying how you're doing things, which is, really if it is automations or AI or tech or visibility or communication or culture, right? Like we are now like we understand that gap so we can amplify how we're doing things to make things more efficient. Then it's about leading and delegating, right? I think this was so important. Um, so oftentimes we'll put in managers but not leaders.
Yeah.
Um, or and then we're like, oh my God, why am I doing their job? Rah. Um, and so, right. And then also delegation and you know, there's like delegation pipelines, right? Like there's things that are easy to delegate and harder to delegate, but eventually if you want out, like you got to be able to delegate everything and make
Mhm.
yourself rather redundant, right? You have to be able to delete yourself. And so, and then the last piece is about exiting and overseeing, right?
Mhm.
And exiting, you know, and at different points of scale, there's different points of exit, right? Sometimes you just want to be able to exit nights and weekends, right? Like if you're working 80 hours a week, you want to spend time with your kids, you gotta be able to exit nights and weekends and just trust that the work is gonna happen or build the efficiencies as you amplify it in that section, so that you can. Um, if you want to exit, like you want to set up like, okay, your business is a cash business to exit because either you want to retire and it's a family owned business, or if you want to like sell it or whatever the case is, right? Like I'm really big on you building to sell
Mhm.
because and sometimes the exit is not your choice, right? Like sometimes a family member gets sick and you've got to exit to go take care of them. Sometimes you get sick and you got to go take care of yourself. So like I'm very big on built to sell because you don't know when an exit's going to happen, whether, and hopefully you're designing that exit.
Right.
Uh, and also, if you're exiting for sale, you want to make your business as sellable as possible and you want to get the biggest ROI, right? Um, but the oversight, right? Sometimes people forget the oversight. It's like, do we have our metrics? Do we know our performance? Are things clear? Because whether you want to be on the golf course, on a Tuesday, checking out how your business is doing,
Right.
which is great. Or if you have investors or there's an acquisition happening, like, people are gonna want to see your numbers. You're gonna want to see your numbers. People are gonna want to see your numbers. You want your managers to manage from numbers. So that oversight is super important. And and the last thing that I will say about scale from a, just sort of high level view is that sometimes you're scaling the entire business and sometimes you're scaling a portion of it, right? Sometimes you're like, we got to scale our team. And what does that look like, right? That looks like, oh crap, like we're hiring 20 people a quarter. Um, that happens, right? Or we're
Mhm.
hiring 2 a quarter, right? Like, so it
It's all relative.
depends, right? It's all relative, but it's the same sort of framework applies. Sometimes you're like, all right, we really got to scale our revenue because, we're growing the sales team, yada yada yada. Or we're scaling our profits, right? We got to make this more efficient. So depending on where you're choosing to scale, right? And economies of scale, we're still using the same framework.
I love that, and it sounds like, so from my perspective in the work that I get to do with clients, it's in the same direction that when your business is just a really well-run business, you have the optionality of, do I want to keep running it? How, my redundancy, or am I bored, or do I not know what I need, where I should work today? Should I just go fishing, or can I focus on M&A, or can I exit, whatever that exit looks like? But
Mm.
the first, I guess, the SC and A in scale for you is like building the baseline, building the systems, building the things that are going to get me out of the day to day. I guess even the L, because now I'm delegating, right? Learning to teach people to lead and putting people in place, and so that gives that optionality of, what do I want to do with this, versus I'm chained to this business and I'm working 50, 60 hours a week because I just wanted to do graphic design, or I just wanted to do code. And now I'm chained to this thing that's not even an asset.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know, I think people throw the word freedom around a lot, like, oh, I want, freedom,
Hmm.
agency freedom. But for me, it's freedom of choice. It's
Yeah.
being able to choose, like, what is it that you want to do, right? And some people are like super content. They're like, you know what? I just kind of want to be the art director of the organization, right? Like, I mean, I still want to own it, but like, I want to be able to create like those really cool, sexy projects, and direct them. I'm like, okay, get yourself to a place where you can cherry pick your projects,
Yeah.
but make sure that the rest of it is running. And I think that's really important, is to have that choice of what is it that you want to do, and then design your business to create the life that you want, not the other way around.
Yeah, that's exactly the framework that I dig into, and it's often, I launched this business because I love doing fill in the blank. But now, fast forward 2, 3, 5 years, I'm not doing that thing because, to our very first point of conversation, now I'm managing people, not even processes, and I'm in the weeds of being a manager. And so, what is it that I want to do? What percentage of my time do I want to spend doing that? And then, how do I put the right people and processes in place so I can come in and say, yeah, I don't want to do that project. It looks kind of boring, but that one looks really cool. Let's do that. Yeah, that's the most successful clients that I've worked with. That's their definition of success. It's not revenue. It's not EBITDA. It's not, it's like work-life balance, absolutely, but it's also like, how well is this business running, and what am I doing with my day? And yeah, so
Absolutely. A lot of the clients that I work with, they just kind of want to create cool shit. That's sort of like their main
yeah,
goal, right? Like that's the marker of, like, what's the cool thing I'm working on? And and can the rest of it subsist, usually like my family, my team, and the ecosystem that I've created. Um, I think that's pretty awesome.
yeah. What do you see as like the biggest hang up, or I guess road bump, whatever you want to call it, for a founder to get themselves out of the way?
So I would say it kind of it depends on the different inflection points, right? So I always say there's sort of like these different plateaus. There's like the 1.3 plateau, and it's a dash to cash.
Hmm.
Usually the biggest hang up there is overthinking. Like, you really just need to do the freaking thing, right? Like, just get it done, do the sales, make the phone calls, like, just get cash. It's like, that's usually the biggest from 1.3, right? Is just get it.
Yep.
Um, Afterwards, 3 million is the next inflection point, sort of, if we're talking about like 6, 7, and 8 figures.
Hmm.
That inflection point is a team. It's You need managers, right? Whether it's account managers, a project manager, you like, what got you to sort of cross that $1 million mark? Is it going to get you to cross the three? I have no, I think I quantified it once. I was like 56% of the people that I would talk to on sales calls were stuck, like 1.2, 1.3. Like, which is why I created this like I was like, statistically, it's significant.
Yep.
It was just like, and they've been stuck there for 3, 5, 20 years. And
Wow.
it's like, we need managers in place. And I think that the most difficult thing to get managers in place is, we need systems,
Hmm.
right, in place for the managers to be able to run and manage performance, right? Because, like, what are managers doing? They're managing client results and performance. And so we need them to have systems in place so that there's collaboration, things are easier, it's facilitated, uh, and you know, you this is also where we need the ability to start to measure performance, right? People get stuck because they're not measuring performance. There's no visibility on, it's like either you're growing too quickly or things are getting stale and you're like, I'm hiring people, but holy crap, our results are starting to go down. I can feel it. There's a lot of, running the business off of guesswork and
Hmm.
gut work. And, this is where I'm like, we need to start tracking numbers and we need to start getting performance in place. And I would say that's one of the biggest things. It's like you have managers, but now you need your managers to manage the performance of that thing that you gave them to do so that you're not stuck doing it.
Yeah. So
And
dashboarding and tracking metrics of baseline, like you said, there's the baseline, creating that baseline, and what
yeah,
are our
absolutely.
expectations? Yeah.
And then there's the other inflection point, which is around the 7 to 10, where you're trying to cross that 8 million. I mean, that 8 figure mark, right? And that usually is a combination of culture, right? Because at that point, you really need leaders to lead,
Yep.
right? You had managers, right? You might have managers, but now you need leaders, right? You need leaders who can set direction without you, which is hard, right? Because you're like, oh crap, like I'm so used to setting the direction, right? I'm so used to doing the strategy. Right? Like, I'm so used to saying, like, this is what should happen and why. And so now you're delegating strategy, and that is scary, right?
Yeah.
Because now you're really deleting yourself off of like that top echelon, highest ROI stuff that you can possibly do. But you need people that can set direction. That means leadership, right? So you like that's where all of the HR systems become so much more important, right? Like the human, like the people operations become so much more important,
Yep.
right? Making sure that the organization is a living, breathing organism that functions. That there's a good culture, that people are staying, that you're not getting glass reviews up the ass that are bad. Right? Like this is the stuff that, your reputation management as a brand, not only for clients, but for talent, is so big, right? So I would say that's where culture really matters, leadership really matters, and if you didn't put that metrics and performance in place at the 3 million, like now you really need it. Like as you're going into 8 figures, like we need to have sources of truth, because we need your leaders to be able to lead from a place of values because that's going to affect your culture,
Yep.
but also performance so that you can really grow.
Yeah. I love that. And those are all things that need to start early on, like at the $1 million mark. Like the maturity level of an agency starts there. And these are the things you're talking about, the systems that need to be able to scale with the business as it grows. And it's not just dollar signs. Excuse me. It's how are we hiring and evaluating based on values. How are we putting the org chart in place to flesh out the support systems that every department needs, and how is leadership building that out and getting out of the micromanagement in the day to day. Still setting the vision, but more 50,000 square foot or foot view versus 1,000 view. Yeah, so exciting stuff. Like I said, I admire what you're doing. Grateful for you to share some of your insight on scale and what you're doing with ScaleTime with the audience. I want to wrap up real quick with a couple of rapid fire questions because they're a lot of fun. So, first is, what's a tool or a gadget that you use day to day that you, other than AI, by the way, that you look back and you think, how the heck did I live without this thing?
Um, I'm a big fan of Whimsical. Whimsical is, a tool that allows you to like do flow charts and things like that. Obviously, because I'm like a massive nerd about these things, but I love it because it's really fast. I'm really big on speed when it comes to tech, and that is one of my favorites.
Interesting. What is a belief that you held strongly 5 years ago that you've completely changed your mind about today?
I think a belief was not that social media was irrelevant, but that it wasn't as important to our business, as much as selling. But now I believe that, like, if you don't have some level of social media footprint, people don't even know if your business is alive.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, they're using that just to see if you have a pulse. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like so
Yeah.
it's like, okay. Yeah.
What's a book that was, monumentally changing for you, either from a life standpoint or business standpoint?
Um I this is not one that I think gets a lot of love, but I love Thanks for the Feedback.
Mhm.
It's especially because I deal with so much people who are in management. And I think that's a really good one so that, like, it really teaches you how to give feedback and how to take feedback and people's biases around feedback, which I think is super important um, in any sort of organization at any level.
Yeah, biases are massive, trying to eliminate them and understand where they're coming from, and, yeah, I'll have to check that one out. I do not know, it's not on my radar.
No, it's one
So,
of my favorites.
awesome. Juliana, thank you so much for joining us. Folks, Scale Time, all the links are in the show notes. Check her out, check out our community, and, thank you again for your time today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me here. I'm very excited to be able to speak with your audience.